All right, well, good morning and welcome everyone. The North Central Region Aging Network, which is the picture that you're seeing on your screen, is really proud to be presenting a webinar series. If you were able to join us last Friday, you heard from Dr. Marlene Stum on her Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate program, and then today we're going to be talking about Alzheimer's 101. So I'm glad that you guys were able to join us, and I hope that this will be useful for you. This is a program that we've been presenting in Kansas, and it has been very successful. So we're excited to bring it out to the broader North Central region. And if you're not within our region, that's totally okay. This is open for everyone. So the North Central Region Aging Network, and the folks that you see on your screen, hopefully you'll recognize some of those folks from your own states. Not everyone is included in that picture. That was from one of our recent meetings in Chicago, and some folks weren't able to make it. But we are a cohort of extension professionals who are interested in aging or who specialize in gerontology. And so we have been a network for about 2 years, and we've been doing a lot of fun stuff. And this is one of our next big initiatives, is to start pushing out some professional development across the North Central region and across the country. So this is one of those efforts. One thing that I will tell you, okay, there we go. We are going to start a series. So far we have only done this current webinar and then Marlene's from last Friday on Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate. But beginning October 5th, we are going to have 2 webinars a month offering some professional development. On the 1st and 3rd Fridays of the month, generally starting at 10 a.m. Central Time. The length of those webinars is going to vary. Some of them might be only 10 to 15 minutes. Others might be an hour and a half, but they will never be longer than an hour and a half. So what you're going to see is on the first Friday of the month, we're going to be offering a gerontology series. So a variety of topics related to aging. It might be a program training. It might just be some content and professional development for you. And then on the 3rd Friday of the month, we're going to be offering more general professional development. And one of the members of our North Central Region Aging Network, for example, is also an evaluation specialist. And so she has a ton of really wonderful information on evaluation that she's going to be providing. We also have some topics ready for you, such as preparing your extension elevator speech, maybe talking about policy systems and environmental changes. So really a variety of topics. So be looking out for that. Your state representative on the North Central Region Aging Network will be sending out that information, but I just want you all to be aware that this is going to be coming up in the fall. We see one question in the chat box about a recording of Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate. That is available, and I sent out the link to that yesterday to your state specialist or representative from NCRAN, so they should be sending that out for you. The current webinar is also being recorded, and we will be sending that out as well. Something of note, so where are you going to find this information? The North Central Region Aging Network has received a grant from the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development to develop a website to host all of this material, as well as some curricula and other resources related to aging. So this website will be up and running shortly, sometime this summer, and then you'll be able to find all of this information on that website. But for now, you can contact your state specialist who is interested in aging or who belongs to the North Central Region Aging Network. And if you're not sure who that is, you can let me know and I can tell you who that individual is for you. So yeah, just be looking forward to more professional development coming from the North Central Region Aging Network. So next, a little bit about me and who in the heck is talking to you today. My name is Erin Yelland, and I am an assistant professor and extension specialist at Kansas State University, and my specialty area is adult development and aging. I graduated from the University of Kentucky in 2015 and then came straight over to Kansas, and so I'm really excited to be here and working with extension. So there is my contact information, Erin Yelland at ksu.edu, and my phone number if you would like to call me. Budget cuts have not taken our phones yet. We're still hanging on to those. So, but you can feel free to contact me at any time if you have questions. Another question in the chat box, your Ohio representative is Jim Bates. And feel free, if you have questions at any time, you can put them in the chat box. I'll try to answer them as we go, but I'll also have a time for questions at the end. So what we're going to be doing today is going through the program Alzheimer's 101. So I'm going to deliver this program today to you like I would to any other audience. That's how I like to train, is give you the information like what you would be giving it to another audience. So I'm going to run through this program for you. This is a very flexible program. You can include as much or as little information as you would like. If you would like to use this information as a short, lunch and learn topic, if you get a request for that, this is certainly flexible enough to do so. But really, I think that this program is a part of a broader initiative to educate individuals on health and wellness and to improve their understanding of one of the biggest health crises facing the world today, which is Alzheimer's disease. There's also some other goals with this program, one of which is that we want to increase the understanding of Alzheimer's disease and increase folks' willingness to really go and get diagnosed if they are experiencing some cognitive decline and some memory issues. So a lot of times people think that there's nothing you can do for Alzheimer's disease, so why would I go to the doctor? Well, in fact, and we'll see in this presentation that there's actually a whole lot you can do if you have a diagnosis, and so we're going to talk through some of that. But this program is really an influential program, and folks from the Alzheimer's Association have really commended this program because it is so important that we are raising awareness about Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. And so we're going to go ahead and sort of start getting into this program for you. But yeah, so it's just Alzheimer's 101. We're going to walk through the program, and then I'm going to talk about some other resources that we have for you as well at the end. So you just heard me mention that Alzheimer's disease is the biggest health crisis facing the world today. So the way that I like to open a presentation is with this quote, and it really resonates with many people. The next thing that I'll do is ask people, how many of you in this room know somebody with Alzheimer's disease or another dementia? And almost always, every single hand in the room will go up. I've even asked the same question to our college students here at Kansas State, and it's still staggering how many hands go up because of their grandparents, maybe great aunts and uncles, and other folks that they know in their life. Alzheimer's disease is incredibly prevalent, and it is really devastating our world. One thing that is often asked of me is, why are we just now hearing about this? Well, honestly, the reason why is because we're simply living long enough to get the disease. So, back in the caveman days, for example, they weren't talking about this or drawing it on their caves. It wasn't in the hieroglyphics because it just simply didn't exist because people didn't live long enough. So now we're living long enough to experience this disease. The number one risk factor for Alzheimer's disease is your age. So obviously, as we're living longer, we're going to be seeing more and more of this. And we really already are. The numbers are increasing, and the numbers, not only the numbers of individuals with the disease, but the numbers of individuals who are caring for individuals with this disease, which can be very devastating as well. I know in Kansas alone, we have over 50,000 individuals who have Alzheimer's disease, and in our state, we have over 150,000 caregivers. So you can find that information from your state chapter's Alzheimer's Association and find out those state-specific statistics for yourself. But again, the way that I really like to open this presentation is asking who knows somebody with Alzheimer's disease, and almost always you're going to get all of the hands in the room to go up. So today we're going to talk a little bit first about the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease, because there is a difference, and it's really important to understand that difference. So when you're educating folks on this, you can use the appropriate terms. So the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. The definition of dementia is a decline in mental ability severe enough to interfere with your daily life. Dementia itself is actually only a symptom. It's not a disease itself. Dementia is the symptom. So dementia is that decline in your mental ability. And dementia can be caused by a whole host of things, the number one cause of which is Alzheimer's disease. So recent studies have said that between 60 and 80% of all dementia cases are caused by Alzheimer's disease. Some people like to even that out and say, or average that out and say 70% of dementia cases are caused by Alzheimer's disease. But regardless of what the statistic is, the number one cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. There are also other causes of dementia that I'll talk a little bit about now. One of them, the second most common, is vascular dementia. So you can see that under the umbrella on the right-hand side. Vascular dementia is generally happens as a result of a stroke, is most commonly when we see vascular dementia. So you have that loss of blood flow to the brain, and that can cause irreversible dementia-like symptoms. After that, another common one on the right-hand side of that umbrella there is dementia with Lewy bodies. Now, this one isn't quite as common. Vascular dementia is about 10%. Like I said, Alzheimer's disease around 70. Dementia with Lewy bodies generally affects less than 2 to 3% of individuals. But dementia with Lewy bodies is incredibly terrifying. And oftentimes it has been equated to having a terrorist live within your brain, which sounds really frightening. But dementia with Lewy bodies is a very frightening disease and cause of dementia. One of the scariest things about dementia with Lewy bodies is the hallucinations that are associated with that disease. So how many of you have ever dreamed about, when you're sleeping, you dream about falling and you sort of jolt yourself awake? I'm sure some of you are sitting there in your chairs shaking your heads like, yes, you felt that happen before. Well, those types of things are incredibly common with folks who have dementia with Lewy bodies. They have these severe hallucinations and dreams, but the interesting thing about it is that they actually tend to act them out. So we've seen in some individuals who suffer from dementia with Lewy bodies that they might perceive a caregiver who's coming to take them to the restroom is actually a serial killer or somebody who's coming to try and hurt them, and they will fight and act out against that individual. We've also seen individuals not only have aggression towards others, but towards themselves. They might experience like spiders or things crawling, and then they'll scratch themselves because they're trying to get the spiders off and things like that. So not only are they hallucinating, but they tend to act it out a little bit more. The other thing that I'll say about dementia with Lewy bodies is what Robin Williams had. And that came out in the news quite some time after he passed away from suicide. But it came out that he was suffering from dementia with Lewy bodies. And it was really unfortunate that that did not get more attention, because it could have brought, or I think it had the potential to bring, some awareness to the disease that hadn't previously existed with such a high profile and well-respected comedian and actor. But it's really interesting that how devastating dementia with Lewy bodies can be. And as we saw from Robin Williams's case, how that can ultimately end up for some individuals because of those terrifying hallucinations. Other types of dementia are frontotemporal. Frontotemporal is one that has those dementia-like symptoms, but its hallmark sign is that it can change your personality because it affects that front part of your brain, which is really where your personality comes from. So we'll see a lot of changes in personality and judgment and decision-making with that cause of dementia. Another one is Parkinson's disease. So Parkinson's disease can sometimes cause those dementia-like symptoms, but not always. So we'll see oftentimes that those can go hand in hand, but we see more often that Parkinson's disease can also be coupled with Alzheimer's disease. So you'll see on the left side of the umbrella there a mixed caused dementia, which is quite common. So sometimes individuals will, like I said, have Parkinson's disease. That might make them more at risk for Alzheimer's disease. We've also seen individuals who have Alzheimer's disease and then have some other issues which might cause them to have a stroke, such as heart disease and things like that. So then they end up with both vascular dementia and Alzheimer's disease. This can be really, really difficult to tease out because it is so incredibly difficult to figure out what is going on in the brain without an autopsy. So we know that the only definitive way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease is through an autopsy. So once you're dead, you actually have to go in and dissect the brain and look for those hallmark plaques and tangles that Alzheimer's disease creates. We have some ability to make a pretty good guess based upon some visual imaging scans and things like that that we can do, and also some behavior assessments as well. So you heard me talk through these different causes of dementia, that there's some different signs and symptoms that can go on. So with frontotemporal, it really affects your personality. With dementia with Lewy bodies, you're having those severe hallucinations. Alzheimer's disease also has its own unique progression. So generally through some behavior assessments, we're able to tell or have a good guess, rather, of what's going on. So that was a really in-depth explanation of some of these causes of dementia, and I don't always provide all of that information to our people who are attending our classes, but I think it's good for you guys to know what each of these are, so that if you would have questions, you're able to answer that. This information is also all included in the scripted PowerPoint, so you'll have this for you in that as well. So we talked about the different causes of dementia, the first of which, 70%, is Alzheimer's disease. So what is Alzheimer's disease? The definition of Alzheimer's is that it is an irreversible and progressive brain disease that slowly destroys memory and thinking skills, and eventually the ability to carry out the simplest tasks. So the key terms there are that it is irreversible, meaning you can't take it away, and it is progressive. So it is going to continually get worse no matter what you do. So what is really important with this is understanding the way that Alzheimer's medicines work. So you'll oftentimes hear of medications such as Aricept and Namenda. Those are the two biggest ones. Aricept is often given during early stage. Namenda is given during mid-stage Alzheimer's disease. These drugs are not actually treating the Alzheimer's disease itself. Alzheimer's disease is continually progressing even when you are on these medications. So a good analogy is that Alzheimer's medications such as Aricept and Namenda are similar to cold medications. So when you take a cold medication, it is not treating your cold. You still have all those germs and yucky things going on, but it's helping your symptoms. The same thing is true of Aricept and Namenda. They are helping to treat your symptoms. So they might keep an individual seeming stable, but on the inside, their brain is still struggling with that disease and is still destroying itself, essentially, through the plaques and tangles that are present in the brain. So no matter what you do, it's still going to be irreversible and progressive. One of the biggest misconceptions about Alzheimer's disease is that it will not kill you, but it in fact will, and it is a cause of death. Currently in the United States, it is the 6th leading cause of death, and among older adults, 65 plus, it's estimated to be the 3rd leading cause of death. So it will in fact kill you because Alzheimer's disease destroys your brain to the point where it simply cannot work. So one of the biggest challenges that we see at the end of life for someone who is in late stage Alzheimer's disease is that they forget to, their brain forgets to tell their body to carry out those simplest tasks. And by simple tasks, I mean things such as swallowing and breathing. So many people who are in late stage Alzheimer's disease and who are dying from Alzheimer's disease can simply choke on their own spit, on their own saliva. That's very common. Your brain will also deteriorate to the point that it will essentially forget to tell your body to breathe. So it destroys your brain to the point where it can kill you. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions, because people think that Alzheimer's disease is simply that memory loss, but really there's a whole lot going on in your brain that you may not realize. And you can see that in this picture below. So on the left, we have a healthy brain. And I like to say that a healthy brain is thick and plump and juicy, which is totally disgusting, but that's how we like our brains. Thick, plump, and juicy. So you can really see that there's some good material to that. You look at the right side of the brain and oh my gosh, what are you seeing? First of all, you see that it is significantly smaller in size. You're seeing a lot more holes. Those holes are filled with fluid that are not going to do anything good for you. And you're seeing a lot of shrinkage, and it just starts to look not thick, plump, and juicy, right? So that Alzheimer's disease really destroys your brain. And the way in which it does that, and you've heard me mention a couple of times about plaques and tangles. So plaques and tangles are the hallmark signs of Alzheimer's disease. They're beta amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. The thing that is really concerning about these plaques and tangles is that they are both made up of proteins that are already supposed to be in your brain. So we can't simply give people a drug to get rid of them because that's not going to help. They need to be in your brain in order for it to function properly. But they start producing in abnormal amounts, and they create these sticky plaques or clumps of protein that create these plaques. What those plaques do is stop the communication pathways between the neurons in your brain. So if you can imagine two people standing next to each other or a few feet apart, and they're throwing a tennis ball. Let's pretend that that tennis ball is communication between neurons in your brain, and those two individuals are neurons. Well, if you put a thick, sticky wall in between those two people, that tennis ball isn't going to get through. So that communication in your brain is going to stop, and it's not going to be able to continue. Now, we've all heard the phrase, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. That is particularly true for your brain. So when your neurons in your brain aren't doing anything, they essentially die. In the basic and simplest form to explain it, that's what happens. So when that thick, sticky wall comes up between the two people throwing the tennis ball, those two people, you can imagine them shriveling up and dying because they're not doing anything. So that's what happens in your brain. Those neurons die when that communication is inhibited. So that's about the plaques. Then we've also heard me talk about tangles. Tangles happen within those neurons themselves, and essentially it tangles up the neuron from the inside. So you're essentially choking off the life of the neuron with these tangles. And again, the tangles are made up of a protein that is already supposed to be in your brain. But because it is being sort of hyper-produced because of the Alzheimer's disease, it spazzes out in your neuron and it tangles itself up, and it's not able to send those communications or receive those communications as it previously could. So all of that in sum leads up to this destroyed brain that you're seeing on the right-hand side. Some extra information for you about the brain. So we know that Alzheimer's disease, one of the first things that is affected is your short-term memory. So we can see in brain imaging scans the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And the progression of Alzheimer's disease generally starts in your hippocampus. Your hippocampus is where your short-term memory is stored, hence why people with Alzheimer's disease lose that short-term memory first. So individuals with Alzheimer's disease might be able to tell you, what they did in high school and who they dated and, all of these sorts of things. And in fact, they might think that you are that person they dated in high school and that you are their mother who passed away 20 years ago because that long-term memory is so good. But people with Alzheimer's disease may not be able to remember what they had for lunch, what they had for breakfast, or if they showered in the last week. That short-term memory is generally completely destroyed by late-stage Alzheimer's disease. So I often provide a little sort of visual analogy of a hippocampus. So a hippocampus is located in the back center of your brain. You can't actually see it on this depiction of the brain in the picture here because it's up inside of the brain. But inside of your brain is your hippocampus, and a good, healthy hippocampus looks like a thick and juicy and plump cocktail wiener. So you can see that I like to talk about brains as thick, plump, and juicy. But a good hippocampus, it looks like a cocktail wiener. It's very small and has some good substance to it when it's healthy. When you get to late-stage Alzheimer's disease, that thick, plump, and juicy cocktail wiener turns into a shriveled up pea. So you've gone from a cocktail wiener to a shriveled up pea. And that is quite literally what happens to your hippocampus with this disease. So you can see why the short-term memory would be gone, because the place that stores that short-term memory is essentially destroyed. So there's a little bit of, or a lot of bit of information on Alzheimer's disease and how it changes your brain. Now we're going to go into the 10 signs of Alzheimer's disease. So this presentation incorporates understanding of what is dementia and Alzheimer's disease, but then we're going to go into some specific topics. And the following information comes directly from the Alzheimer's Association, which is the #1 organization in the United States and across the world dealing with Alzheimer's disease. So we're going to go through their 10 signs of Alzheimer's disease, which are their 10 warning signs. After that, we're going to talk about the benefits of early detection and diagnosis and some steps to better brain health. So first, going through the 10 signs. And this is very important because the number one reason why people are not getting diagnosed is a lack of awareness or a lack of understanding. They might think that these signs and symptoms are normal and are normal age-related declines, but they are not when they occur in a pattern or they're repetitive. And I'll talk about that as we go through them. So the number one sign is memory loss that disrupts your daily life. So the difference here between what is normal and what is not. So all of us, every single one of us on this webinar forget stuff. We all do. It happens. That is totally normal. But when we forget things, but completely forget them, it doesn't come to us later. It happens all the time. That's when it's concerning. Just because I forgot my lunch at home one day this week, or I forgot to call somebody back, or something like that, that is totally normal and is not concerning at all. But when it begins to disrupt your daily life and you're no longer able to function the way that you normally would, that's when we're concerned. Number two is challenges in planning or solving problems. So I'm not sure about the upcoming generations, but I'm assuming most of us on this webinar could balance a checkbook. That would be a task that many of us could do. But for individuals with Alzheimer's disease, they may not be able to solve that problem or to plan enough to manage their own finances, for example. So they may not be able to understand or even realize that they have an issue that needs to be solved. And if they do realize they have an issue that needs to be solved, they may not be able to solve it. So oftentimes we can make these small mistakes, but when these problems or challenges occur more regularly and consistently is when we need to be concerned. Number three is difficulty completing familiar tasks. The number one example that I have with this is when I was in graduate school and I was doing some observations in a memory care unit in a long-term care facility. So a memory care unit is where individuals with a form of dementia will reside, and it has specialized care for those individuals. So everyone who lived in that unit had some sort of form of dementia. There was an individual who was in the kitchen and was making himself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And this is a true story that I observed several years ago when I was in graduate school. He got out the bread, got out the peanut butter and the jelly. He put the peanut butter on one side and the jelly on the other. But when he put the sandwich together, the peanut butter and the jelly were on the outside. So the two bare slices or bare sides of the bread were put together. So he essentially made the sandwich correctly up until the point where he sandwiched them together. He continued to eat that sandwich, had peanut butter and jelly all over the place, but he didn't even realize what was going on or what had happened. So it was that familiar of a task that he was not able to complete. And even as he ate the sandwich and had peanut butter and jelly dripping all over the place, he continued to be blissfully unaware of what was going on. So something as simple as making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich can be really difficult. The other example that I provide with this one is tying your shoes. So the question that I'll ask participants is, how many steps does it take to tie your shoe? And I'm sure many of you are sitting here right now counting how many steps it takes to tie your shoe. And people will give me answers ranging from 2 or 3 to 24, anywhere in there. But then I talk to them about the steps that it takes to tie your shoe when you're an individual suffering from Alzheimer's disease. So the steps might look something like this. Where are my shoes? Okay, I found my shoes. Which one's my left foot? Which one's my right foot? What was I doing? Where am I at? Where are my shoes? You might walk away, not know, and get onto something else, and you still don't have your shoes on. You might go back to where are my shoes? What was I doing? Which one's my left foot? Which one's my right? And this process continues. So doing something as simple as getting on your shoes for an individual with Alzheimer's can be really, really challenging. Number 4 is confusion with time or place. One of the things that I saw when I was observing at that memory care unit in the long-term care facility, and this was during the summer, there were individuals walking around with long sleeve shirts, heavy jackets, boots, long pants in the middle of summer. They simply did not know what season it was. So it's that extreme confusion with time or place that's concerning. Many of us today, it seems like these days we can't even remember the date half the time. We have to look at our phone to see that, oh, today's the 16th. That's totally normal. But when you go somewhere and you forget how you got there or why you're there, that's when we can become concerned. Something else of note, many of us walk into a room numerous times and forget why we're there. I'm sure many of you are shaking your heads thinking, yeah, I do that all the time. and that's normal. Not all the time, but when we walk into a room and forget why we're there, once in a while, that's totally normal. But when you drive someplace and you forget where you're going or why you're there or what you're doing, that's when we need to be concerned. Number 5 is trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. So with this, we often say that individuals with Alzheimer's disease, as the disease progresses, their goggles get cloudier and fuzzier. So literally your vision declines with Alzheimer's disease. What that can look like is sometimes it will start to take away your peripheral vision, so you're not able to see as far out as what you once were able to. But it can also disrupt your vision in other ways. One way is that it can make the understanding depth or seeing the bottom of things to be really challenging. So a really great example is this. How many times have you heard about an individual with a dementia or with Alzheimer's disease being scared to take a bath or a shower? Many people, when I ask this question, raise their hands and say, yes, I've heard of that. I know that that's a big struggle. And it really is. But sometimes there can be a simple solution for it if it's because of this visual images and spatial relationships. The reason why some individuals are scared to get into a bathtub is because that bathtub generally might be solid white. And with a solid white surface, they simply may not be able to see the bottom of it. So they think that you are trying to get them into a never-ending hole and that they're going to fall. We have seen in some long-term care facilities that putting a colored mat or even those sticky little rubber duckies or fish or something like that, some sort of pattern or a different color to help them understand or help their vision not tell their brain that this is a big hole, can be really helpful and can help them get into that shower or in that space. Another example, and you'll oftentimes see this at long-term care facilities, particularly if they have a memory care unit, is doors that they do not want their residents going out of will have a giant, or not even a giant, but will have a black mat in front of it. Because the same thing happens there as in the example with the white shower. They think that it's a black hole and they are not going to dare to step over that or step on it. So you will oftentimes see a black doormat in front of doors that they don't want those individuals going out of because they're simply scared to step on it. So you can see that having this disease, just from those couple of examples, can really disrupt your vision. The next is new problems with words in speaking or writing. This is quite common, particularly in those early to mid stages of Alzheimer's disease. So something that I'll ask participants is, what is the thing called that is on your wrist that will tell you the time? And they will say watch, right? But then I ask them, so what do you think someone with Alzheimer's disease who forgets what that is called might call it? And we come up with a whole host of names. One of the things that I've actually heard before, they could not remember the name of a watch, and they called it a wrist clock instead of a watch. So they remembered sort of what the purpose of it was. It was a clock on your wrist, but they could not remember the exact word of watch. So you'll see some challenges in those familiar words and remembering and recalling those familiar words. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace your steps is next. And this is a big one. And a lot of times people get really concerned with this for themselves, even if they are a healthy person, because how many times do we lose stuff? I mean, I'm constantly losing stuff in my house. I swear it's because my kids take it and hide it from me and they know I'm looking for it. But oftentimes we'll forget things. We lose our keys, we lose our water bottles, we lose things all the time. But that's totally normal because generally we're able to go back, retrace our steps, and figure out where it was. So for instance, right now, if I lost my water bottle, I would be able to say, okay, I remember having it in the car this morning when I was driving here because I took a drink. I remember filling it up at home this morning, so I know I'm not crazy. So it's either in the car or I left it in my backpack, right? So I'm able to go back and think about where I was this morning, what I did the last time that I had it. You're able to retrace those steps. When that ability goes away, that's when we become concerned. Next is decreased or poor judgment. An example with this is that many individuals with Alzheimer's disease, we have seen this example many times, will give away money to charities or other organizations in larger amounts than what they should. We also see many individuals with Alzheimer's disease get caught up in scams and become victims of fraud and exploitation, financial exploitation, simply because they have that decreased or poor judgment. The last two signs, number 9 is withdrawal from work or social activities. Oftentimes we see this in the earlier stages simply because people know what's going on. Alzheimer's disease is not like a switch that flips and suddenly you are completely demented and have no idea who you are or what's going on. It doesn't work like that. It's a very progressive disease. So when you have the disease, and we have many people who are in early stage Alzheimer's disease and can still function quite well. But people who are in early stage disease oftentimes don't want people to know what's going on. So their solution to that is to withdraw because they don't want people to notice. Maybe they're embarrassed and they don't want to go to their morning coffee club because they don't want people to notice and they don't want to be embarrassed by what's happening with them. Changes in mood and personality are another one. So we oftentimes see this later on in the disease because of the destruction that has happened to the brain, but we also see it earlier in the disease because of those same things that I was just talking about with that withdrawal from work or social activities. Oftentimes we can see that social butterflies who were, incredibly active in their community, when they're in early stage disease, they might withdraw and that personality might completely change and that they don't want to talk to anybody, they don't want to see anybody, and many times it's because they're just simply struggling with what is going on. So those types of things are quite common. Now, one thing to note about these 10 signs, and I get this question asked all the time, you do not have to have all 10 of these signs. Sometimes people will experience 1 or 2, maybe 3 of the signs, But we have some individuals who will never withdraw. They'll never have a change in their mood or personality with Alzheimer's disease. Some people might have incredibly wonderful judgment skills in the early and mid stages of the disease. So you do not have to have all 10 of these signs, but you can also only have one. So even one of these signs can be a sign that you have Alzheimer's disease. So it is incredibly important that if you recognize these signs in yourself or in a loved one, that you go and see a doctor. And that's my next slide. So what should I do? If you recognize any of these signs in yourself or a loved one, your first trip should be to your primary care physician. So what's important to note there is that I said your primary care physician, that primary care doctor that you see or should see on at least an annual basis, because it may not be Alzheimer's disease. And that is one thing that oftentimes reassures people, is that go and talk to your regular doctor because it might not be the disease. In fact, there are several things that can cause dementia-like symptoms that are completely treatable and preventable. And one of those things is a urinary tract infection. A urinary tract infection that goes untreated in older adults can absolutely create dementia-like symptoms. And as soon as you're on those antibiotics and getting that UTI taken care of, those dementia symptoms are gone, if that is the true cause of the dementia symptoms. Another common thing that can cause dementia-like symptoms is vitamin deficiencies. So vitamin D and vitamin B12 in particular, if you are low on those vitamins, that is known to cause dementia-like symptoms. So something as simple as taking a multivitamin or a vitamin pill can reverse those symptoms. Untreated thyroid disorders is another thing that can cause dementia-like symptoms. There's a whole list of things that can cause dementia-like symptoms that are not Alzheimer's disease. So your number one trip should be to your primary care physician. A lot of times people think that just because they're having these cognitive challenges that they need to go straight away to a neurologist, unless you're having some other major symptoms or things like that. Your first trip should always be to your primary care physician. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the benefits of early detection and diagnosis. Okay. Excuse me while I take a quick drink. So this is really important, and you've heard me say several times that we really, one of our main goals is to increase awareness about Alzheimer's disease and the warning signs so that people can get diagnosed. Now, you've also heard me say that dementia, or Alzheimer's disease rather, can kill you. And you'll hear me tell you now that there is no prevention or treatment or cure for Alzheimer's disease. And many people are aware of that. So they think, why in the heck should I go get diagnosed if there's nothing I can do about it? But in fact, there are numerous things you can do about it that can be beneficial both for the individual with the disease and their family members, friends, and neighbors. So these benefits are seen on your screen right now. So the first is that you can learn and understand your own disease process. You heard me say earlier that Alzheimer's disease isn't like flipping a switch. You're going to have a period of time where you're still fairly capable of functioning independently and competently. So understanding what you can do to understand your own disease and then what you can do in your future is incredibly important. You can also explore resources in your community and online. I know in Kansas, and of course in many of our states across the North Central region, we live in incredibly rural and frontier areas of the United States. And because of that, we can have limited access to resources. So especially in those rural areas, I always drive this point home. It is so important that you take that time at the beginning of trying to understand your disease, to learn where the resources are. Where are you going to have to go? Who is going to have to come to you? Who are these people? And contact them early so that you can connect with that resource. Then that also gives you time to explore resources online as well. And there are numerous resources available online to help understand your own disease process, but also to help you through the disease itself. The third one is that you can remain independent for a longer period of time through simple changes to your home environment and to other things that you're doing for your health. So we know that individuals who have cognitive decline, who make preparations in their home, make it a safer environment, coordinate with friends and neighbors and family members for check-ins and for help, can allow that individual to remain in their home for a longer period of time. And obviously that has numerous implications, one of which is huge cost savings. We know it is incredibly expensive to live within a long-term care unit. And while those long-term care facilities are incredibly well needed and they are incredibly helpful when the time comes, we like to keep people in their home for as long as possible. People are generally more comfortable in their home. They feel more confident and capable in that space. And obviously it saves us a lot of money. So it's really important that we try to keep individuals in their home as long as possible. You can also receive the maximum benefit from available treatments. Now you might be thinking, Erin, you already told me that there are no treatments for Alzheimer's disease, and that is true. However, we do have those medications that can help your symptoms, such as the Aricept and the Namenda. And we also have, next on your list, clinical trials. So right now in the United States, there are thousands of clinical trials going on that are testing new drugs, new interventions, new resources, whatever it may be, that you can get involved in. Now, the thing that I always note with clinical trials is that you do not have to be an individual with disease in order to participate. Clinical trials are always looking for healthy individuals to participate, simply because they want to follow you over a period of time and understand the things that you're doing that may help to prevent or delay the onset of disease, for example. So you do not have to be an individual with disease to participate in a clinical trial. However, if you are an individual with disease, you are also eligible to participate and perhaps take advantage of treatments that are currently being tested. So they might currently be testing right now the cure for Alzheimer's disease. And if you enroll in clinical trials, who knows, you might be one of those participants. So I think the benefits of participating in clinical trials always far outweigh the risks. The next one is participate in planning your own future health care. So this sort of goes back and goes hand in hand with several of the other things that I've mentioned, but you can, the earlier that you receive a diagnosis and the earlier you're able to start talking about the disease and making your own plans, the better it's going to be. Within your future healthcare, these are things as simple as filling out your durable power of attorney for healthcare and your living wills, and getting those decisions set for you, but also making decisions about what long-term care facility do I want to go to when the time comes. We know that most people with Alzheimer's disease in late stages are going to need a lot of assistance. And so is that going to come from family members and friends? Are you going to be able to have a safe and comfortable place in your home to receive that care? Or are you going to have to go to a facility, and what facility do you want to go to? Who do you want your doctor to be? There's numerous things that you can participate in the early stages of your disease if you take the time and have the willingness to do so. Planning for your financial future goes along the same lines. How are you going to pay for long-term care? Who's going to get the house? Who is going to get grandma's yellow pie plate, as we heard in last Friday's webinar? You're able to make those decisions earlier in your disease rather than later. Once the later stages come, you're not going to be competent enough to make those decisions for yourself, and they're not going to be legally binding. The next one is similar to planning for your own future healthcare and what I said there about getting your durable power of attorney for healthcare, and that is naming someone you trust to make decisions for you when you become unable. We know with Alzheimer's disease that a point will come where you will be unable to make your own decisions. So who do you want to make those decisions for you? Who do you trust to make those decisions? And last, and certainly not least, is that by having an early detection and diagnosis, you can reduce the burden and stress on your family members and loved ones. This topic oftentimes very thoroughly resonates with older adults and individuals with disabilities at any age as well, and really any of us, because I know that I would never want to be a burden on my family, right? Many of us feel that way. And so when you talk about that, as blunt as it is, being a burden and reducing stress on your family members and loved ones, that can oftentimes set people over the edge and make them go to the doctor because they don't want to be a burden. So they may want to then go to the doctor, get that diagnosis, and start making plans for their future so that they can reduce that stress on their family members and loved ones in the future. All right, so we so far have gone through the difference of dementia and Alzheimer's disease and what Alzheimer's disease is. We've talked about the warning signs of Alzheimer's disease and why you should have an early detection and diagnosis, and why you should go to the doctor if you're experiencing symptoms. The next thing that I do in this program is talk about steps to better brain health. Now, I've already told you there's no prevention, treatment, or cure for Alzheimer's disease. And so doing these things is not going to guarantee that you won't get disease, but what we can guarantee that it will do is improve your overall health. And in many cases, some studies are showing that having improved health can delay the onset of dementia-like symptoms. So living a healthy lifestyle is certainly a wonderful thing, and it's not going to do anything bad for you. So we oftentimes go through these steps to better brain health. These are put out by the Alzheimer's Association. So again, more resources coming from them. Much of this stuff is certainly not unfamiliar to extension educators, because this is the type of stuff that we're talking about every day with participants and those individuals that we're educating. This is just another way to reinforce steps to better brain health. So there's 10 of them that we will go through. The first of which is break a sweat. And I don't need to tell you guys anything about the need and benefits for exercise. One thing that I do here is I always ask them, how many minutes of exercise a week do you need? And it's amazing to me how many people know that. And then depending on the audience and how receptive I feel they might be, I'll ask them, how many of you get 150 minutes of exercise a week? And then sometimes I'll even ask them, if you don't, why don't you? And you'll hear a lot of those common answers that we hear all the time. I don't have enough time. I don't know. I hear I don't know so frequently that they just don't know why they do it or why they're not doing it. So it's really good at this point to incorporate some conversation, and I think some blunt conversation about why we're not doing this, because extension educators have been telling people for years, in the CDC and everybody else has been telling us for years that we need to educate, or that we need to exercise. So have an open and blunt conversation with why aren't we doing it, and what are some steps that we can take to incorporate this into our daily life. And that's the part that I really love about this conversation, because it can be hard talking about why you don't exercise. That can be embarrassing for some people, and that that can be a challenging conversation to have. But then brainstorming ways in which you can incorporate exercise can also be a big revelation for some people. It might provide them some motivation to go ahead and do that, or provide them some ideas that they hadn't previously thought of. So use some unique ways to try and get folks to incorporate exercise into their daily life. Hit the books is the next one. We know that individuals who have more formalized education have a decreased risk of Alzheimer's disease. So in Kansas, the rate of individuals who have Alzheimer's disease is cut in half if you have an advanced degree. So it's something like 7% have less than, or no, I'm sorry, I got that backwards. 14% of individuals who have Alzheimer's disease in the state of Kansas have less than a high school diploma. But then that risk is cut in half to like 7% if you have a more advanced degree. And I don't have that paper in front of me. I wish I did. But the point is that we know for certain that people who have more formalized education have a lower risk. Now, that's not to say that people who have advanced degrees aren't going to get the disease. We know that that's obviously not true. But people who engage in educational opportunities are going to keep that brain working in ways that people who do not. So while we know that formalized education is really important, this can also be a good plug for extension programs, because the more that you are learning and the more that you are engaging in your community, the better off you're going to be. Also, things such as attending classes at your local community college. Sometimes community colleges will offer programs for older adults, either free of charge or at a significantly reduced cost. Try and see what those opportunities are in your community. Maybe you can even find some learning opportunities online to share with people who attend your classes. But really talking about any way in which they can keep learning is going to be incredibly beneficial. The next step is follow your heart. So we always say what's good for your heart is good for your brain. The Alzheimer's disease often talks about the DASH diet, and the Mediterranean diet is being something that individuals might consider following. But generally, any decision that you make for your heart health is also going to contribute to better brain health. The next step is buddy up, and this one is all about social activity. So we know that older adults who are more socially active and engaged oftentimes have better health outcomes than those who are socially isolated. So this is a really great time to talk about the importance of getting out in your community and volunteering, or being active in a church group or a social organization, or simply with family and friends. But the risk of social isolation in older adults, and really in individuals of any age, is incredibly high, and we want to avoid social isolation as much as possible. The next one is Feel Up Right, and I'm going to skip right over this one because I know in Extension, obviously, we have a ton of resources on healthy eating and nutrition. So it's really great to incorporate some conversation about healthy eating and nutrition at this point, and include any activities or worksheets or whatever it is that you would like. The next one's the last 5. The first one here is Heads Up, and this is all about the need to protect your head across your lifespan. And so the example that I'll use here is, how many times are we yelling at our kids and our grandkids to put their helmets on? My son was riding his bike in the driveway just this weekend, and he didn't put his helmet on, and I was like, get that helmet on, and doing the mom finger. And he was like, but I'm only riding in the driveway. And I said, but it doesn't matter, because simply falling in the driveway can have just as much damage on your little head as falling in the street, right? So we're constantly telling our kids to keep their helmets on and protect themselves, but oftentimes we see that us as adults, we're not doing the same thing. So it's so important throughout your entire lifespan, no matter what age you are, that if you're riding a bike, for example, you wear a helmet, that if you're out doing things that should require head protection, ear protection, eye protection, whatever it is, that you're protecting yourself and taking those necessary precautions to improve your overall health and improve those health outcomes later in life. This is also a really great point to talk about fall prevention. We know that older adults who experience a fall are at an obvious higher risk for traumatic brain injury. There is also a link between traumatic brain injuries and dementia-like symptoms and other causes of dementia. So we want to protect the head at all costs. Things such as installing grab bars in the bathrooms, making sure that we have proper handrails on stairways, removing throw rugs, doing simple and relatively inexpensive things like that can help to prevent falls and also protect your head in the long run. There are wonderful programs within Extension and outside of Extension on fall prevention, and this is an excellent time to promote those. There are other things that we want to consider with fall prevention, such as medication management, your vision and hearing, and things like that. So making sure that we're promoting that holistic view of fall prevention is really important. Stump yourself is the next one, and this is where I like to tell folks that, you know, playing your Sudoku puzzles and crosswords and playing solitaire and doing things like that is better for you than not. So anytime you're engaging in some sort of activity that is challenging or is using your brain in a different way is very, very good for you. So with this, I oftentimes will share with them simple ways to challenge your brain. The first of which is to brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand. That actually works your brain in miraculous ways, because when you brush your teeth, you're generally not thinking about it. It's sort of that built-in muscle memory. But when you do it with your non-dominant hand, you're going to be thinking about things a whole lot more than you would have been otherwise. Catch some Z's is the next one. I always ask folks how much sleep they should be getting per night and how many of them are actually getting that amount of sleep. We see that many older adults, in fact, are getting a pretty good night's rest for the most part. Whenever I've asked this question, I've seen that. But then we talk about the importance of sleep throughout your lifespan, because the choices that you make as a 20-year-old are going to affect your health when you're 90. The research is clear with that. So we talk about that throughout their lifespan, and it's a pretty good point for conversation. Butt out is the next one, and of course we're talking about quitting smoking here. Thankfully, the rates of smoking in the United States have been decreasing, and we hope that they continue to do so. Kansas State University's campus is going smoke-free on June 1st, I believe, which is incredibly exciting because many campuses around the country have been doing that for years, and we're just now catching up. So the importance to not smoke, but also not be around secondhand smoke is clear. The evidence is clear. The research is clear. So there's nothing good that comes from smoking. So at this point, if you have resources for tobacco cessation in your community, it's a good point at which to talk about those. The last step to better brain health is to take care of your mental health. We know that mental health is a crisis across the United States, and we need to continue talking about it. And this is one way in which we can talk about the importance of taking care of your mental health. We know people who have untreated mental health conditions are at a higher risk for dementia-like symptoms and Alzheimer's disease. So things like depression and anxiety that go untreated can have really harmful and negative effects in the future, including those dementia-like symptoms, Alzheimer's disease, and things like that. So we want to make sure and make it normal that if you are having mental health issues, or if you're concerned about something in any way, shape, or form, no matter how small you think the issue is, you go to your doctor and talk about it, because it can have more impacts on your health than what you may realize. So the next thing that I do after talking with these folks and talking at them for quite some time, I like to get them up and get active. And so we literally do just that. On the resources page that I'll share with you later, I have a small list of seated and standing exercises that I'll do with my audiences. So I like individuals, especially older adults, to see that exercise is you're able to do that no matter what your abilities are. So if you're in a wheelchair or have limited mobility, you're still able to exercise. And I always say that exercise doesn't mean you have to go to CrossFit and flip tires and climb walls and do fun things like that, or you don't have to run 20 miles. For some people, that might be what they enjoy, and that's how they love staying fit, and that's perfectly fine, but it doesn't have to be that hard, especially for our older adults. So doing simple movements can be really beneficial. One of the members of the North Central Region Aging Network, Chelsea Byers, I'm not sure if she's on the call today, but she shared with me her doctor said that motion is lotion, and I love that. And I've shared that with some of our audiences, that motion is lotion, and that we want to keep moving to keep our body healthy and keep our joints healthy. So any movement that you can incorporate, no matter how strenuous or not strenuous, big or small, it's so important to be doing that. So I have a list of some exercises that I obtained from the Go for Life campaign out of the National Institutes of Health, National Institute on Aging, that you can do with your audience. If we had a little bit more time, I'd make you do a little bit of desk-ercise, but because I've been chatting your ears off, I'm going to let you do that later. You can do it right now without me guiding you through it. But I'm going to keep going through this presentation and then talk about some of the resources that we have. The next thing that we'll do, though, is some brain busters. So I do want you to be interactive with this, because I always think they're funny and make us think. So I'm going to make you think a little bit here. If you want, if you think you know the answer, go ahead and type it into the chat box, and we'll see if you can come up with the answer. So I have 3 different riddles that I'll share with you. And this is the first one. A man stands on one side of a river, and his dog is on the other. The man calls his dog, who immediately crosses the river without getting wet and without using a bridge or a boat. How did the dog do it? If you know the answer, put it in the chat box. There we go. A couple of you got it. The river was frozen. Nora said Airbud. I love that answer also. Yeah, so the river was frozen. I need to change this so that I say that the dog didn't jump or something, because a lot of times they'll say that the dog jumped, which is also a really good hypothesis. But the answer to the riddle is that the river was frozen. Here's the next one. What do these 3 words have in common? I'll give you a hint. Think about how they're pronounced. There you go, Nora and Sandra. Yes, they can be pronounced differently if you capitalize the first letter. So Polish or polish, job or job, herb or herb. So that's another fun one. The last one, what makes this number unique? Yep, every number is used. No number is repeated. That's correct, but not what we're looking for. So think about the way that you would spell these numbers. This one always stumps people. Yes, Star got it. There we go. And Jessica, they're in alphabetical order if you spell them out. So those are just 3 little riddles that I've included in this presentation. You're certainly able to incorporate some other sort of brain busters, but I think these are fun and they always get the audiences engaged. One fun example, I was giving this presentation to at a senior health and wellness expo that was intended for older adults, and one of them had brought their grandchild with them who was in 5th grade. And so we ended up playing this Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader style, and this 5th grader got every single one of these riddles correct. And only one other person had gotten the first riddle correct. So it was kind of a fun way to engage the audience. But doing something fun like this certainly helps them see that challenging your brain is really important and that thinking in different ways can be really valuable. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm not going to take your questions yet. This was just my slide to remember to tell you that that's the end of the presentation for participants. Some helpful tips for you is, first of all, to use the Alzheimer's Association. So the Alzheimer's Association is in every state in the United States, and they have numerous chapters and organizations that have individuals who are there to help you. In Kansas, we have a wonderful relationship with our Alzheimer's Association. We have 2 chapters in Kansas, and they have helped to provide trainings and resources. Several of our extension agents in Kansas who have presented Alzheimer's 101, they might have also invited a representative from the Alzheimer's Association. So a couple of ways that I've seen it done is that the educator will provide Alzheimer's 101, and then at the end, the Alzheimer's Association representative might provide a more in-depth training or is there to answer questions. We have also had Alzheimer's Association representatives come to our Powerful Tools for Caregivers programs. In one area in particular, they were giving a Powerful Tools for Caregivers program, and there were numerous caregivers of individuals with Alzheimer's disease there. So we called upon the Alzheimer's Association, and they came and were able to provide some more resources and expertise for those individuals. So do not hesitate to reach out to your Alzheimer's Association. Those folks are incredibly knowledgeable and are willing to help and partner with Extension. And I'm speaking for them more broadly, but we have a wonderful relationship with them in Kansas. And I know other states are working with their Alzheimer's Association chapters as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to those individuals. The next thing that I want to make you aware of is for your own professional development, or you might want to share this with others. The Alzheimer's Association has this great website which is training.alz.org. And if you go to that website, you will have access to free training videos on all of the programs that the Alzheimer's Association provides. So they have Alzheimer's basics. They have things on behaviors such as wandering and other challenging behaviors that folks with Alzheimer's might exhibit and that their caregivers have to manage. So there's a whole host of resources on their website, so I encourage you to reach out and use their website. If you go to that training site, you might, if you're going to give this Alzheimer's 101 program, there might be some more things that you want to put in your toolbox and brush up on before you give this presentation, and you can just sit there and follow through their video recordings online. So now if you go to my website, which is aging.ksu.edu, you'll be able to see a whole host of resources that we have to go along with this Alzheimer's 101 program. So the program, or the resources that we have, are listed up here on the PowerPoint. So we have a fact sheet that goes along with this, a leader's guide that goes through the objectives, the audience, the time that you want to take for the program, evaluation, instructions, all those sorts of things. A scripted PowerPoint, so the PowerPoint that I gave you today with my notes is available for you. We also have an evaluation template. So if you are going to present Alzheimer's 101 in your community, I would greatly appreciate if you could send those evaluations to me. You can either scan them and email them, you could hard copy, snail mail them, or just send me a synopsis of what you did. But I would appreciate hearing who is incorporating this into their programming. Also on the website is an exercise list, so those seated and standing exercises that I mentioned earlier when we have that break for exercise in the program. You can also incorporate things that you're doing. If you're doing like a Stay Strong, Stay Healthy or Strong Women, you might include a couple of those exercises and then use that as a time to promote that program. I also have a radio script, newsletter, and news release template available for you. So if you want to advertise that you're doing this program, or if you just want to give out some information about Alzheimer's disease, that's available for you. We also have an interactive learning simulation. And so this is a lot of fun and involves some beach balls and people, and that's it. And you can just get inexpensive beach balls from a dollar store or big box store. And so what that does is, earlier in the presentation, you heard me talking about those plaques and tangles. This is an interactive way to sort of visualize what's happening in your brain with Alzheimer's disease. And so that's all written out for you if you would like to incorporate that into your presentation. We also have a marketing flyer, which you can use and hang up around libraries, coffee shops, wherever, post it on social media to advertise that you're doing the program. We have 2 3-panel poster sets. So these are really big in Kansas. I'm not sure how much they're used in other states, but I think they're 17 inches wide by 27 inches tall, and it's a set of 3 posters. We have one on the 10 signs of Alzheimer's disease and early detection and diagnosis benefits, and then we have another set on the steps to better brain health. And so these 3-panel poster sets, you can download them and then have them printed yourself, or of course you could order them from the K-State Research and Extension bookstore. But these are really good for displays at libraries, or if you're doing a health fair and things like that. Then we also have a template that can either be printed onto a magnet, or we've also printed them onto little bookmarks, little pieces of paper that talk about the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. So those things are available to you to use if you would like to take this information and put it in your own PowerPoint template that represents your state. That is perfectly fine with me. Again, I just want to know who's picking this program up and where it's being used so that we're able to talk about those impacts more broadly. So now is your time for questions. I'm sorry we only have 5 minutes. I guess I talked more than what I anticipated. So I'm going to scroll through here and answer some questions from the chat box. And then if anyone else has questions, we can go out to those. So I mentioned the terrifying hallucinations with the Lewy body type of dementia. Do any of the other types involve hallucinations? So generally not to the extent that you'll see with the Lewy body dementia. Yes, so generally not, and definitely not, like I said, to the extent that you'll see with the Lewy body with the acting out and things like that. There can be some other brain changes, but it is not generally something that is as prominent with the other types. Okay. Cheryl asks, how would a facilitator handle a potential situation of someone in the audience that fears having dementia and shows signs of anxiety with the description of the various kinds of dementia described in the presentation? So that is a really, really challenging situation. It is something that is really real and is going to be probable for some people to experience that. One thing that you can do at the beginning of your presentation is say that, give an outline of what you're going to be talking about, and say that if anything makes you feel uncomfortable, or if you have any questions, feel free to stop me and we can talk about it, that sort of thing. And unfortunately, dementia, having a form of dementia is so prevalent and so common that many people might experience this happening. So it's really important to remember that people are people, and that if someone's getting upset, by all means, address that individual and just talk about it and be kind with them and listen to what they have to say. Many times people I've found who are coming to this presentation are very open and receptive to learning, and they're there because they want to learn more about what is going on. And sometimes that information might upset them, but giving them the information that they need and guiding them to resources in your community is incredibly important and is going to be incredibly valuable and appreciated by that individual. So this is where I'd like to pull out some sympathy and empathy for those individuals, and also helping walk them through what their next steps might be. Also re-emphasizing again that just because you might have some signs and symptoms, again, doesn't mean that it's Alzheimer's disease. So having that conversation about, going to your primary care physician just to check things out can be good to do. Okay. Do you have a source that you tap for these? And I think that was mentioned during the, let's see. I'm trying to remember because I remember seeing that question. The puzzles, thank you. Okay, during the puzzles, no, I really just sort of Googled some riddles and came up with some ones that I hadn't heard of before. So I just used the friendly Google for the riddles. You can find all sorts of things on the internet, I'm sure. So yeah, I just tried to find some things that I hadn't really heard of before that I thought would be not too incredibly difficult for some people and would get some people engaged and active. But of course, for the exercises, I did source those from the Go for Life campaign and a couple of other resources that had talked about safe exercises for older adults. The leader script does include a lot of my examples, and I'm looking at it right now. I know a lot of my examples are written in there. If you have questions on other things, or if you remember something that I said but I didn't write in the leader's script, just let me know and I can type that up for you and let you know. Okay, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to either type it in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask. All right. You guys are very welcome. If you have any questions, again, my email is erinyeland@ksu.edu. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. Again, remember that beginning October 5th, we're going to be having our twice monthly webinar series that we are very excited about, and we hope you join us for that. But again, if you have any questions, it's erinyeland@ksu.edu. I'll put it in the chat box right now. Oops, everyone. Okay. And feel free to reach out to me at any time. Thank you guys so much for joining today. I hope that you find this program useful and beneficial, and that you go out and help educate on this very serious disease and talk about things that we can do to manage and improve people's lives. So thank you guys for coming, and I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or call me. I will be here. Thank you.